Yes, I am. I'm here. I think I'm unmuted.
Oh, fantastic. Welcome.
Yes, I'm here and now unmuted as well.
Perfect. Over to you, Imam.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And my dear friend J.D., welcome. As
thank you.
Proud member
they called you pastor in the intro. I was totally freaked out there for a minute.
I know.
Like, what happened?
I think your energy is sort of vibrating.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry.
Your sharp skill in evangelizing is just working on us. As a proud member of Concordia Forum, it is a distinct pleasure and honor to welcome my dear friend, my conversation partner of a decade and interfaith partner, Pastor Dr. J.D. Greear, to us. As he was briefly introduced by Mudassar, he is the current president of the Southern Baptist Convention. For those who are not from the United States, Southern Baptist Convention is one of the largest Protestant, more traditional, more evangelical, I'm saying this as a factual term, not an adjective, community, and he's leading it. I think you are the youngest, right, JD, to be the president?
I am, at least last I heard.
Yes. And I think Southern Baptist Christians and Muslims have a lot in common, one of which is not always the best of us make the headlines, and not always the best of us shapes the image of our communities. But the similarities goes beyond, and that's exactly why my first meeting with JD about a decade ago was a love at first sight. As someone who takes his religion seriously, who identifies religion as the most essential and important reality of his life, it was quite honestly, with all due respect to everybody else, a breath of fresh air to see a faithful disciple of Christ, Christian who takes Christianity, his text, his tradition, as seriously and try to live up to it as a religious leader. JD comes from that particular community, and also he lived in Indonesia and traveled to many different parts of the Muslim world. Unlike many of his colleagues, he has a lot more in-depth knowledge and understanding to Islam as a religion and Muslims as people. Interfaith conversations in North America, and I think it's true for globally, often, to me, unfortunately, happens between very liberal, reform, progressive, and reformist wings of those traditions. It's fine to be liberal, reform, etc. But if all the cross-faith conversation, Christian, Muslim conversations, and others are only happening by very, very liberal wings of our community, and if more traditional, observing, pious, practicing people are not part of the conversation, I think it's a huge loss. And I hope we can model and exemplify here between the two of us and the participation of the people in the audience, how you can be completely committed and rooted to your own faith tradition, and without compromising anything about who you are, you can engage in meaningful conversations with people of other faith traditions. And that's what makes JD a very special Christian leader at this critical time. Welcome again. Did he freeze with my introduction? JD, can you hear us? I think he dropped out, and he will come back. We can utilize this moment to maybe, for those of us who are not very familiar. Hi, JD, are you back? Good, you are back. Just our moderator needs to unmute you. We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you.
I'm good here now. Can you hear me now?
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. I got raptured up real quick, and I just came right back. So.
The Concordia Forum, as I explained to you earlier, a platform, a space where European and North American Muslim leaders come together and engage in conversations about our mutual interests, common challenges, and opportunities. But not all of them are very familiar with the Southern Baptist Convention or the kind of brand of Christianity that you represent. Can you give us a little bit of background to start us off?
Yeah, well, you talking about background about the SBC in particular? Would that be most helpful?
Yes. What in the broad Christendom, where would you put them, and what can you say more about that particular community?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Like you said earlier, sometimes people from your community and my community, the headlines don't always come out what we want them to to be. And so I think that's very gracious of you to allow me to do that. So, we would stand in the historic tradition of what Christians have believed since the beginning, going back to the Apostles' Creed and over the last 2,000 years. Evangelical simply means we believe in the inerrancy of the Bible. We believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ. We believe in, salvation by faith by grace through faith. And that we believe that's a message that we want to get out there. So that's kind of the substance of that word, evangelical. If you're familiar with Christian history, of course, the big kind of schism in the church was the Protestant Reformation. We are Protestants because we believe that an ecclesiastical authority structure had taken over the church, and one that God never intended. And the Church of God was supposed to be based on the Word of God. And so Martin Luther, the Reformer, said the Bible is the authority, not the Pope. And so since then, various Protestant denominations, one of the, I guess you would say the difficulties or challenges of Protestant is if there is no central authority, then a person with a Bible is kind of that is what we call the autonomy of the believer. And so the result is you have a lot of different flavors of Christians. It doesn't mean they're all divided. It just means that there's different networks that run. The Southern Baptist Convention was formed in the mid-19th century. Unfortunately, it was founded for the wrong reason because it split from the Northern Baptists because they believed that slave holders ought to be able to be pastors and be missionaries. And so we definitely started out on the wrong side of that question, but that came to a point of repentance toward a couple decades later, and so they repented of that, and then now just hold to what would be like say traditional Christian belief, and definitely in the mainstream. So it is right now the largest Protestant denomination in America. I'm not sure sometimes what I'm doing, but I'm mainly a dad and mainly the pastor of a local church, and then I'm able to serve as the leader of this network. By the way, I hope for your for our group here, I'm outside because this is literally the only place I can get away from my kids. So I'm hoping it's gonna work out and we won't have any technological problems.
JD has a beautiful, beautiful family, and his family is with him in this journey of witnessing this beautiful tradition of Christianity. And I think you understood he's being humble. The Summit Church that he pastors is not a small church. Tens of thousands of people worship there every Sunday with multiple satellite offices. And I participated in one of their Christmas services, which was in a large, almost stadium or the theater, where tens of thousands of people were glorifying God in their own ways and beautiful ways. And the reason I started with this question is, as Muslims, we are often pained of the dehumanization, character assassination of our faith, that mocking, that misinformation that we are victim of. And we always say, do you know a Muslim? Hear from us. But sometimes we turn around and do that to other communities that we don't have too much information with, and we go with the headlines, or we go with the sensational coverage of that community and not really go deep. Thank you for that beautiful explanation. How is your community or communities like you in the United States, churches, are experiencing COVID-19? What's the flavor? What's the moment? And what kind of faith leadership is on display? What are some of the helpful Christian voices? And what are some of the unhelpful Christian voices in response to COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, well, I think of multiple things I would want to say there. So I'll start with two or three of them, and then we can press in and dialogue on any of them. The first thing I would say is obviously this is a time of just horrendous tragedy for people. And so anything positive that I say, I don't want it to be I don't want to try to, overlook the fact that there are people who are suffering and dying, particularly in communities and parts of the world that are even less equipped to be able to deal with this. But one of the good things has been, I think it was our previous guest that was on here talked about Pascal, and I was really, my ears perked up because Pascal said, this is a 17th century French mathematician, philosopher. He said that the problem of modern man is that it's not that he said no to the voice of God, it's that he can't hear it because he's too busy. And our enemies, the devil's strategy since the beginning has been distraction. And so without trying to downplay at all the genuine tragedy, I think just the the stillness that people in the community that I lead have been able to have has actually been a really good thing. I haven't been able to check in as much with you, Abdullah, but I know that we've had some of the best family time. And I'm finding a lot of families in our church. So that's been a very positive thing that's been there. I think another really positive thing that we see God doing is sometimes, the arrogance of man in thinking that, that we have tomorrow promised to us, and as long as we've got money in the account, then everything's going to be great. The Bible, and I know the Quran also repeatedly warns against that kind of disposition. And sometimes God in love will shake foundations in order to get you to turn to the right foundation. I told our congregation a story last weekend. There was a lumberjack who goes out to cut down a forest of trees. It's right beside a mountain face, and as he begins to cut down one of the trees, he notices that there's a really beautiful bird building a nest in the top of one of these trees, and so he didn't want to destroy the bird or the nest, and so he takes a sledgehammer and he starts to beat on the base of the tree until the bird gets annoyed and flies to another tree. Well, that's also a tree he's going to cut down, so he does the same thing, and they repeat this dance like 10 or 11 times until eventually the bird goes into the side of the rock face and builds his nest there. And you can imagine how annoyed the bird was at this, like, what's this lumberjack got against me? But the lumberjack's motive was, of course, compassion. And I told our congregation, I said, this is a lot of times we feel like, why would God do this to my body? Why would this happen to my family? Why would this happen to our economy? But you can see that in love, what God is doing, Jesus said, was that he's shaking the foundations to try to show you that, man, you're in a forest that is about to be cut down entirely. That only really one question matters, and that is, are you ready to stand before God? And anything that God does to shake away false foundations to get you to look to the right one would be something that, from eternity's view, would cause you to say that was love that did that. So that's a second really positive thing that's been done. I think the third one is that it's allowed, and I'll speak from a Christian community perspective. I know there are many things in Islam as well that would agree with this, but it's allowed many Christians to grapple with what I would call the nature of generosity and the motive for it. Anybody can be generous when everything's going fine. Everybody can when you got a lot to spare. Some people don't, amazingly, but it's easy to be generous in a time of prosperity. But one of the things that is supposed to separate Christian generosity or the generosity of faith from other kinds of generosity is that it's done in a time of scarcity, that Christians run toward danger, not away from it. They run, they don't retreat backwards into self-preservation. They go forwards into self-sacrifice. And that's because at the center of their faith is a man who laid his life down for his enemies and not one who, took the lives of his enemies from them. Jesus, when he was gave the Sermon on the Mount, most famous sermon he ever gave, one of the things that Jesus said was, he said, blessed are you when you are good and kind to those who persecute you. Then you'll be a light to the world and you'll be the salt of the earth. Everybody, all the Christians know, Abdullah, they all know the light of the world, salt of the earth thing. We put it on coffee cups and t-shirts and, sing Kumbaya.
Tiles and ceramics from Jerusalem.
Yeah, that's right. You're very familiar with this world. Christian kitsch. But they all know how to do that. But the context is not just normal run-of-the-mill generosity. It's generosity that is done at great personal cost to yourself. When other people would retaliate with vengeance, or when they would retaliate with preservation, it's then that you see the real motive of generosity. And of course, what Christians believe is that following Jesus, when it came time to save, he went toward danger and laid down his life, not retreated. One little thing, and then I'll shut up and let you press in here anywhere you want, or challenge, or whatever you want to say. But a lot of people don't know that that probably the biggest growth, the single biggest growth in Christianity around the world took place in the 3rd century AD. And at the time, historian Rodney Stark, I was reviewing this before I called, make sure I got the details right, but there was only 2% of the Roman Empire were Christians. So a very, very small amount, 250 AD. By the time we get to 312 AD, it's nearly 50%.
Wow.
Right, so we're talking about a massive jump. And the thing that Rodney Stark says was the catalyst was there was a worldwide plague. and up to 5,000 people that they know about were dying every day. And so they were, hold on just a minute. Remember the kids thing? Hey.
No, give my regards to them.
My friend says hi, but y'all got to go somewhere else. Okay. So y'all stay inside. All right. I'm sorry to all your guests. That is just life with kids there.
And for those who are not from the South, you all means loving.
That's right. Just nothing but affection. So
yes.
Anyway, one of the church historians at the time said that what happened was when everybody else fled the cities, when all the pagan priests had begun to retreat and not just quarantine, but flee, it was the Christians who stayed in the cities and ministered to the sick and the dying, sometimes at cost of their own lives. Sometimes they contracted the disease. They would actually dig graves to help bury them. And it was because of that, the generosity that took place over that decade, that's what was the catalyst to this movement really going forward. One of the emperors, a guy named Emperor Julian, the Roman emperor, he said in disgust of the Christians, he's like, those Christians, they take care not only of their own poor, but ours as well. And it's because at the center of their faith was a God who laid down his life for his enemies, not took it. So that's a third thing I really see happening, during this time. So anyway, I've said a lot. I'll shut up.
No, beautiful. Your last point is profound, and I will come back to that. In a time of crisis where certain beauty and contribution of religions, in plural, can come forward, and I would like you and I to discuss what Islam and Christianity can bring to this crisis, more practical terms, but I would like to remain in the theology and the conceptual world for a while. You alluded to this. I wonder if you can go a little bit deeper. I think one of the fundamental questions when this level of collective calamity hits humanity is every religious groups are struggling with the ancient, never-ending question of theodicy. How can a loving, caring, merciful God, the speaker before you, first 20 minutes, gave his own perspective. How can, from a Christian perspective, what kind of answers you hear or what kind of answers you give to your own community when they say, my wife is a nurse, she lost several of her colleagues, healthcare workers. A lot of people are suffering and many of them are just innocent people who didn't ask for this, leaving their loved ones behind in further misery, etc. Why bad things happen to good people? Yeah. In light of COVID-19, what are some of the Christian responses that you relate to?
Yeah, you were going to ask me easy questions, Abdullah. That was good.
If you have friends like me, you don't need any enemies.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, this is, I don't know, I haven't seen a statistic specifically for Islam, but I know that this is one of the top 2 or 3 reasons why people sometimes lose their faith in Christianity is they don't have a good answer to this question, and it's a troubling one. I'm not sure if I make any assumptions here about Islam. I mean, I've studied Islamic theology, but obviously you and your community would know a lot more. But one of the things that Christians believe is that, and I believe Muslims share it in common, is that the whole world is under judgment because of the collective sin of mankind. That we, as the human race, all of us, one thing we have in common is that we believe that our ways were superior to God's ways, and so we've gone our own way, and that's caused a curse of death to be upon the world. And that's why when we say, why do bad things happen to good people, Scripture's answer would be, which good people are you talking about exactly? Because we're all underneath a curse. Now, that's not to say that every time something bad happens, somebody, that they did something that deserved that. It just means that we're under a curse, and sometimes that curse affects those that are more guilty, and sometimes it affects those that are less guilty. Just like goodness in the world sometimes blesses people who are in many ways deserving of it. And sometimes it, the same sun shines on the criminal that shines on the innocent person. And so what Scripture, tells us is that, really through, in light of eternity, in light of how long eternity will be and how blessed is are the saints together with God, that anything that happened in the 70 or 80 years of earth is going to seem like what? It's just Jesus compared it to birth pains. My wife, I've seen her give birth to 4 children, and for each of them, it was, she was in pain. But 10 minutes after the birth was over, she didn't remember the pain because of the joy of the new baby. Well, when it comes to being in eternity, you look around and you say, I can't hardly remember the pain so great as this. I have a friend who is my age. He got brain cancer, and the doctors gave him less than 5 years to live. And he's got kids about my age. And it's a heartbreaking story. But somebody asked me the other day, he said, you think when you get to heaven, you're going to be like, oh, I get it. This is why this happened. And this is why that pain. He said, I think my attitude will be, what pain are you talking about? I can't even remember it. It's just all been swallowed out. The third thing, and this last thing I'll say that Christians bring to something like this is the understanding that God entered into the suffering, for us, and he came in to identify with us in it so that he could, and I realize I'm leaving what we share in common and getting a little bit into specific Christian, but he took on that pain onto himself and suffered for it so that he could deliver us from it. I think there's so much in what I said there that Christians and Muslims, that we have resources to deal with pain that the world doesn't have. I mean, when you look at people that don't have this kind of framework, I kind of look at it and I say, so that's it? You just suffer, and sometimes innocent people, and you die, and that's it. It seems like what a despairing way to live. But I think that, this is one of the perennial questions, and I appreciate you hitting me with it cold.
Always. As you know, we don't have original sin in Islam. But I think your Christian reflexes through original sin is somewhat similar, that most Muslims or most religious reflexes reflect on the eternal life. God's mercy is 100th unit, Prophet Muhammad says, and only 1 unit of it, 1% of God's mercy manifests in this world. And the 99% of God's forgiveness, mercy, love to humanity will manifest in the world to come. So Muslims immediately go to saying, whatever happens in the 60, 70 years, this is only part of the story. There's a story before this life, and there's a story after this life. How, even though our departure point is the same, our strategies might be different, how we articulate that situation, but it's similar as well. But as you know, both in Christianity and Islam, there are Christians or Christian teachings who are contrary to what you and I just said. Mm-hmm. In the Christian community, the people who are known as gospel narrative, who are seemingly over-glorifying the 70, 80 years, who are measuring their success or their relationship with God based on what you have and have not on this world. And we have Muslims versions of this as well. Saeed Khan is asking, my good friend from Michigan, is asking, how do you speculate, would you speculate how the pandemic might affect the prosperity gospel narrative that is strong in some Christian quarters in the United States?
Yeah, well, I think it shatters it because it's false. I mean, and I appreciate you saying that. There are, unfortunately, a lot of Christian, and I'll put that in air quotes, spokesmen and women who, teach that if you do right, then you will automatically experience blessing, almost like a Christian version of karma. And you and I have talked before about how that's a problem, and that's just not what. I know it's not what the Bible and from my understanding, the Quran is not what it teaches either. That sometimes there is, suffering. Sometimes there are things that we're called on to sacrifice, and it's not always, it's not always going to be easy to be a follower of God and to do what He says. And so, I think it kind of shatters it. I've watched one of the most ridiculous things that I've seen recently is, some of these pastors on TV, casting out the coronavirus and spitting at it, and it's just, I'm kind of like, Lord, how long, can you rapture that guy, right? Rapture is what Christians believe about Jesus taking people off earth back up in heaven. Like, how about rapturing that guy right now? Beam him up immediately. It is the gospel. It is the false gospel of earthly prosperity that might be the biggest enemy to, I think, true biblical faith. Because if our hope is here, then that means that we don't love God for God's sake. We love God as a means to an end. God becomes like, if I serve Him, He'll give me this. And what I really love is this other stuff over here. God can't be loved for any reason other than His own sake. You love God because He's God. And I think the prosperity gospel goes against that.
Yeah. Seeing your discomfort, if not disgust, of those clownish caricaturization of Christianity, you have to understand, for Muslims, this is a therapy. When you see a crazy Christian or a pastor doing something in the name of Christianity so unimaginable, you feel comfortable at least that you don't own all the crazies in the world. That hey, crazies do not belong to Islam.
You do not have a monopoly on the crazies in the world. We got plenty, okay? And listen, for every one you've seen, I can show you 10 more.
Yes. And your second religious reflex, which is again, very, very, from the same DNA, but very Christian language, that through these events, God teaches eventual blessings. God brings people individually and collectively. One of the climactic scene of Joseph in Egypt, as one of the most powerful men of Egypt, he looks into the very eyes of those brothers who did so much evil and harm to him and says, what you meant evil, God turned them into blessings.
Yeah.
So reflect with me what eventual blessings, without ridiculing and trivializing people's suffering at the moment. But there is a human pedagogy, psychology that I think articulating some of the eventual blessings would come out of this would ease their pain in the current moment as well.
Yeah.
What eventual blessings that God could produce and create as a result of COVID-19?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I've given a couple already. I'll give one or two more, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say, because I've heard you share things like this before that I thought were really insightful. When I mentioned sometimes the slowing down the family, we talked about, the false foundations. I think recovering sort of the generosity, I've taken more neighborhood walks in my last 3 or 4 weeks than I have all the time leading up to this time. Really kind of the thing that matters most in the world is people, and that sometimes I use people to accomplish things rather than using things to love people. And so I think that's going to be a blessing as we just times like this in distress have a way of showing us what actually matters, what values. And I can't see that. I think there's going to be some hard questions asked in our medical system, and there'll be some hard questions asked in society. I'm even right now, why is this hitting certain communities harder than it is others? How are the sins of the previous generations and our generation here in the United States, how have it created disadvantageous circumstances that people live in that exacerbate a problem like this one? We in America, we love to talk about how we see all people equal in the eyes of God, and how we believe that, in freedom for all. And I think what this shows is that while that is a value that we hold to, that there are many places we fall short of that. And I see this, really asking that. So I see a lot of good happening out of it. I know that a lot of what God does and things like this, sometimes you can't always make sense of. It's like I always tell people, like, if you could look back on your life and see 2 or 3 things, and at the time you thought they were terrible, and then later you saw how great they were, I tell them, like, don't you, that's only with limited time and perspective. You can already see some of that. Don't you think given infinite time and perspective, you'll look back and see the reason for all of them? So I'm trusting God. It's painful, but it's encouraging. What would you add to that, Abdullah?
My number one, I will only add my top one. It's both my nightmare and the dream. This is a global pandemic. It's a global health crisis. The worst case scenario is this will be a huge slap in globalization and, again, cosmopolitanism. As a result of this crisis, my fear, my nightmare is nation states' borders will be stronger as a result, that people will become more internal. The nation state ideas of 20th century will be resurrected, and people will start building figurative and literal walls around their nation. But the best case scenario where religion can play an incredible role is people will see, as a result of this pandemic, is almost everything and anything is global anymore. It's impossible to undo and reverse the globalization process that we have taken in the last 150 years. If anything, we will get even a smaller global village as we go on. That means we have to invest more in institutions that brings different cultures, religions, communities, all the challenges that cosmopolitanism bring, economic, social, but also cultural, but also religious, that religious communities will be forced to articulate their teachings, not the answers of their good hearts, but the religious communities, Islam and Christianity, will be forced to go back to their tradition and give more constructive, more non-diluting, watered down answers to how are we going to live together? How are we going to share this world together? How are we going to glorify God's names together in the 21st and the 22nd century. I think that job is not done. As I said, most of the interfaith work well-deservingly keeps receiving that it remains in the superficial. People only engage with it with a sense of blurring those boundaries between them. It comes at the expense of diluting their particularisms, not making them better believers and followers of their own faith tradition. I am hoping the nightmares will not come true, but I'm hoping in achieving that more globalized, more connected, more interdependent global community, religion, in this case Christianity, Islam, will play a much more constructive role.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, yeah. I feel like this is one of the things that I've been in meeting guys like you and just other guys that I've had a chance to. Omar Sulaiman and I've I told you, became friends recently.
He's a good person.
Yeah, it's just seeing that there's a role that we, and I'll speak as a Christian here, but there's a role that we, because there's still more Christians in America than there are Muslims, and because this would be a Christian majority nation, that puts us in a position of strength in some ways, at least here, and that that we ought to be the best advocates for you in a time when, especially in a time of danger. I mean, it's kind of like in a time of war. I know this is not like war, but people want to circle up and you want to put all the Japanese in the internment camp, and you want to say, well, if this thing originated in China, then I bet all Chinese people are here, spreading it. And say, I feel like we ought to be the ones who step up most quickly and say, no, that's not how we ought to take the burdens of our Muslim friends and neighbors and represent them as if they were our own. And we haven't always done that. And, and so that's something that I'm hoping through conversations like this one, that you and Omar and others can help me in leading our church better in that.
Indeed. We haven't done to that each other at its best. At its worst, we have been, many of us, many Christians and Muslims, on the side of, for example, reflect on the Christian community's persecution in Pakistan, Christian minorities' persecution in Indonesia. There are so many admirable Muslim prophetic voices condemning and working against that kind of majority hostility, but not enough, not strong enough. And similarly, as you know, there are many Christians here, they are fueling the fire with the Muslim ban and rising Islamophobia. There are some despicable Christian voices and faces. Forget about being in solidarity, but they go even fueling the fire, the flames of hate and bigotry, regretfully.
Yeah, that's right.
Here's a question from Samir Akhtar. I find your view similar to the traditional Muslim perspective in many ways. How does your theological perspective address the challenges of modernity, materialism, secularism, intolerance, and environmental degradation? There's a lot here. So this brother Samir is expressing his slight surprise and delight that you sound like a typical Maulvi Saab or a traditional trained Muslim scholar in many ways. As much as you can explain, I think they are encouraged by your wonderful answer to the large question of theodicy. Now they're asking your question about secularism and modernity.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised by that, and that's a very gracious thing for Samir to say. But it's not surprising because we share so much of the roots of what we call a biblical worldview. Even of the 25 prophets that you celebrate in Islam, we recognize in our holy books 24 of them. So it wouldn't be surprising that we would approach these things. I feel like, unfortunately, because the contemporary discussions have a way of getting so large that sometimes we forget all that and we only focus on those handful of things that separate. And those are some very important things. I mean, I don't want to, you and I have talked about that. We're not doing anybody any favors as if you were like, oh, we all teach exactly the same thing. I mean, the Christian understanding of salvation by grace is a very unique thing. But all those approaches to those things, I would expect that your scholars and ours would sound very similar. When it comes to a challenge like, secularism, we realize that idolatry is one of the greatest, challenges to the human heart. It goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve wanted to choose, a certain tree over the presence of God. When it comes to, secularism being its own new religion, that is, something that I think you and I are going to find a lot more common cause in the future, because I don't want to turn this into a persecution pity party here, but I know
suffers more.
Well, Muslims, they deal with it. They've dealt with this for years on college campuses. Well, in recent years, evangelical Bible-believing Christians are facing much of the same thing there. If you're going to teach that marriage ought to be between a man and a woman, and that gay marriage is not something the Bible teaches. I mean, forget the question of whether or not it ought to be legal in society, but can you even say that and believe that? That's becoming something that is just, it's like the new fundamentalism, which would be secularism, is saying, listen, Hollywood is our high priest, the New York Times is our high priest, and if you violate that, then you are out. I mean, one of the things recently was kind of heartbreaking and disturbing is Mayor Bill de Blasio's, reaction to, Samaritan's Purse is a group that represents more traditional Christian beliefs, and they run a hospital, right in the middle of Central Park for free for people and Bill de Blasio, says, well, it was kind of a little bit gratifying because he said, well, we have to have them here because if not, we can't take care of all these COVID victims. They're coming, they're free, they've set this up. But he said, if we had any other alternative, we wouldn't allow them to do it. So here you've got, certain Christians that they just believe what Christians have believed for 2,000 years about the sinfulness of homosexuality. And now, they're saying you can't even be in the healthcare system. And that's a secularist view that was going to affect Muslims and Christians both, because we both do think that while we understand, separation of church and state or mosque and state, and we recognize there's a public square, we also understand that I can't separate my faith from me. And I'm going to, in anything I do, I'm going to have to bring in the view that God gives me. And that's something I think Muslims and Christians will find common cause on. The fruits of religious liberty go back to this understanding that a man's relationship with God is something that the state can neither mandate nor control. And so it has to be, if I became czar of America, if I could pass a law that everybody could become Christians, I mean, I wouldn't do that. But if I could pass a law, well, I mean, if your heart, Abdullah, doesn't want to believe in Jesus that way and follow him, then merely forcing you to do that externally when your heart's not there is not going to help. And so, in faith is the roots of religious liberty. And I think that we've got something, I think whereas right now we end up being a lot of the opposite, I think as secularism grows as a religion, you're going to see a lot more of us coming together saying, I need to watch your back and you've got to be able to watch mine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think well put that modernity or secularism becoming a religion to itself. And when a lot of seculars point out to religious fundamentalism, bigotry, intolerance, which is true, there are those who are religious and intolerant, maybe violent and extremists. But as intolerance and bigotry is a innately human thing, you see the religion of secularism being intolerant, illiberal. And this example from the New York is an incredibly good one, that a lot of the criticism that they make about religion, they are practicing themselves by being narrow-minded and intolerant in that sense.
Yeah. I remember it was a administrator of a school, like some education official said, the one thing we will not absolutely not tolerate is intolerance. And what they meant by intolerance was teaching anything contrary to the popular, moral mores of the day. And so what exactly do you call the act of not tolerating intolerance? Pray tell, maybe that would be intolerance, or we, so I agree. We need a secular square where, a Christian hospital should treat a gay person and a straight person with the exact same care. There should not be any discrimination. But to shut down a Christian hospital because the people who believe what the Bible teaches about sexuality and marriage, that's something that's pretty scary. Absolutely.
It's a form of theocracy in the secular sense that we should fight against. It's going to rip up our social fabric more so than ever. Yeah. Let's see if, as you know, we don't shy away from difficult conversations, J.D. And if this is not where you want to go, we have a lot of more questions. And as I always say, no conversation about Islam, no presentation about Islam is complete if you don't address the issue of jihad, violence, extremism. You cannot pretend that this is not happening. It's one of the biggest elephants in the room. There is a question from the audience: how to understand those avid, very visible, loud Christian evangelical supporter of President Trump and some of his policies. What insights you can provide us to map them out and untangle, because often they are the ones who shape the entire image of Christianity, evangelicals, Southern Baptists altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you said we don't shy away from difficult questions as opposed to all the easy ones we've been talking about up to this point. So when it comes to, I'll try to give a short answer here because you and I could spend a couple hours talking about this. But there are, I would put those Christians that support Trump into two categories. There are those who believe that he is like a great picture of what some kind of leader should be. And to be honest with you, Abdullah, I have literally zero patience for them, because I think they have sacrificed their integrity and their witness on the altar of political expedience. I understand that many of them are afraid, and they're afraid because whether this is right or wrong, they felt like, that the left was very aggressively, shutting down some of the things.
Anti-religious.
Yeah, and they felt backed into a corner. They felt mischaracterized, whether it was, Obama calling, saying they're bitterly clinging to their guns and religion, or, Hillary calling them a basket of deplorables, or, whatever. They felt afraid. And so human nature in that moment is to find a strong man who, will come out with a big club and, beat all the enemies up. I'm not justifying. I'm just saying that's how some of them felt. And I felt like it was a serious damage to our credibility, because so many Christians gave unflinching support for Trump. That's one kind. There's another kind. When you hear a statistic like 78% of evangelicals voted for Donald Trump, in that 78% is a humongous group that felt like, well, I'm not excited about these things that he says, about the Islamophobia that he garners, about his treatment of women. I'm not excited about those. But when it comes to the Democratic Party's open embrace of abortion, when it comes to their hostility toward traditional Christian morals, when it comes to their antagonistic relationship toward religious liberty, when it comes to their championing of identity politics, I'll vote for whoever keeps them out of office. And so it was kind of like, well, you got to hold your nose and vote for somebody. So they said, the devil we see in Trump is worse than the devil we see in Hillary. Is the devil we see in Trump is better than the devil we see in Hillary. At this point in answering that, I'm not trying to justify or tell you which group is right. I'm just trying to explain that a lot of people that ended up voting for Trump did so with great personal grief over how his character seemingly had disqualified him from office, but there didn't seem to be any better alternatives. Unfortunately, Abdullah, I'll be the first to say, and I've said this before, I don't think Christians in that category were nearly vocal enough about, if there are things, yeah, that's right. There are things that Trump is doing that a Christian likes, the pro-life stuff, the religious liberty stuff. If there are things like that, you ought to be the loudest in critiquing those ways that he creates fear in other communities, the way that he does not really represent, forget that Christianity just does not represent American ideals, as so, and that's something I feel like we need to repent for.
That's beautifully done. I knew you wouldn't let us down, but it's something to be worthy of reflection, how there is a similar chunk of Muslims, for similar reasons, they are stuck and in exile in the Democratic Party for almost the similar reasons, that they find some space in the Democratic Party, but they have a lot of ethical, moral qualms. They don't feel their worldview. In so many of them, actually, their worldview is closer to Republicans.
Right.
But Republican Party has become increasingly hostile, increasingly anti-Muslim, especially in the last couple of years. So they seek refuge in exile in the Democratic Party. It's something to be reflected. Yeah. As people who believe in God's hand in all these big events, I wonder what are some of the theological reflections.
Yeah. And I will tell you, Abdullah, my role, I feel like, is to undermine the confidence of our people in both parties. I never go on to say, after the explanation I just gave you, I never go on to say, therefore I think because of issues A, B, and C, pro-life, religious liberty, that therefore all Christians should vote for Trump. Nor do I say because of, because of some of the issues that the Democratic Party champions, the equality of people, that, that be therefore we have a Democrat. I leave that up to each individual person. And, I think that's where I've got to draw a line. And I can't remember what we were saying now, but anyway, I think I was trying to agree with you with saying, I think we ought to, have to back from that, but, well, I lost my train of thought.
No, I respect totally your bipartisan and independent situation, but as you know, I cannot afford to be independent and neutral. My entire religion and my entire community is under attack by a Republican Party. Even though I'm a registered independent person, I will advocate and vote. To me, the lesser evil is unfortunately in this case, from where I look, from the loyalties and the commitments and the not only to my religion but also to American democracy as well. I feel Democratic Party or its candidate is the lesser evil. Therefore, I will be partisan. Not until all the primaries are done. After August, you will see me advocating for whoever becomes the Democratic Party. But I totally understand and respect your position. Here's another question from Saeed Khan. Dear Pastor, my understanding is that Samaritan's Purse required participants to sign a pledge that said that they are Christians who oppose same-sex marriage. I can understand a private organization having certain requirements, but how prudent is that to possibly exclude people who are not Christian or have a different understanding on what U.S. Supreme Court has made legal?
Yeah. So it's not the patients who had to sign that; it was the volunteers and the doctors, which makes sense. I mean, if there's going to be an Islamic ministry, I would assume that people that are serving and representing and volunteering for the Islamic ministry would be Muslims, and I wouldn't look at that as a violation. So I think if Samaritan's Purse were to discriminate against the people they treated, that would be wrong. But if it's going to say our faculty, I mean, if Concordia, if I find out that, I don't know this, but if I find out that Concordia, one of its, stipulations for people that lead Concordia is that they're Muslim, I'm not going to be like, that's wrong. I'm going to say, well, of course, that makes sense. They're a Muslim ministry. So, but let me be clear. I didn't come on here to really defend Samaritan's Purse or anything. I was just trying to give examples. And so Samaritan's Purse may have ways that they've fallen down on this. I don't know. I'm just.
No, it isn't. As someone who studied quite in detail, that's why I ask again to give you a chance to clarify. Services, people don't discriminate in these hospitals. It's just the employees. It's the same for every Islamic organization, that in order to represent that Islamic organization or work for that organization, you have to sign into a pledge, a commitment, a code of ethics, which is perfect defined.
Right.
Let's go back to COVID-19 without further delving into political. I think we will do a lot until November, a lot more political.
Yep, I'm sure.
What other further teachings of Christ or pieces of scripture that keeps rising up to the surface in the last couple of weeks of Sunday services that you are doing from distance? Like, what was your sermon like this morning? What are some of the pieces of tradition that you have been reflecting more than others?
Yeah, no, that's really good. Well, I found myself gravitating a lot more toward the passages that talk about the hope that Christians have in a moment like this. Most Christians, honestly, Abdullah, and I would say most Muslims probably in the same category, their hope is in the odds. Well, it's only 3%. That's the highest I've heard. And really, it's only like half of, what percent are really in danger. And whatever statistic you've heard, and I'm like, is that really the best? It is Hebrews 9:27. It is appointed unto man once to die. After that, the judgment. Here's the stat: 100%. 100% of us are going to stand before God. And at that point, how big the house was we lived in, what country, what nationality we were, what political affiliation we were, none of that's going to matter. So I think those kind of ultimate passages, James 4:14, why do you boast proudly that, tomorrow you're going to do this or that? You don't even know where tomorrow is coming from. That's been something there. I think I've already talked about kind of being the light of the world, the generosity that Christ that he teaches his people to live with. those are the things. This morning, my message, I did something. Usually I try to just teach through one scripture passage, but I gave sort of a big picture view of the 5 things that God says he's doing in the world in a moment like this one. And he's given us a physical picture of the moral horror of sin. Number 2 is he is giving the world a wake-up call about his what we call the second coming of Christ, which I believe Muslims believe as well, but second coming of Christ.
But we have a better picture of him. When he comes, we know that he's a dark-skinned Middle Eastern man. So we will our ability to recognize him is higher than white-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed Scandinavian guy.
Yeah, you actually probably are 100% correct there. Many Christians in America don't realize that every time they pray in the name of a dark-skinned Middle Eastern refugee. Who they in praying through the name of Jesus.
And if he chooses to come back through American airports, he will have a hard time these days.
That is correct. Yeah, exactly. But he'll probably have to go through Atlanta, regardless. Coming back that way. Everything I do goes through Atlanta. That was the second one. The third one, the third thing that God is doing is this is his thunderclap, telling us to take sin seriously and eternity seriously. The fourth thing is he is giving Christians a chance to put generosity, true cross-faith generosity on display. And number 5 is one that we believe, now again, I'll be really quick on this because this is specifically Christian.
Take your time.
But we believe that, that the gospel, which is the news that Jesus died in the place of sinners and offers a gift of free salvation, that needs to go to every nation. And we believe that God does things like this to try to unsettle things so that the message spreads more easily. And so when you look at what would the Bible say, God is doing, those are the 5 big things. So anyway, I'm sorry.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I think this is our opportunity as Muslims to get into Christian services inside so many Christian teachings during this moment of crisis. I think one thing you said is beautiful. One role religion can play is to keep the hope of God, the light of God shining. In Islam, hopelessness or despair is equated to atheism or not believing in God, which is the greatest sin, denying the existence of God or associating partners with God. Because if you believe in such a power, you cannot be despaired. You cannot be hopeless. And I would love to end. We only have a few minutes left. What would be your sending of blessings, of hope and inspiration? What would you want to share for your Muslim brothers and sisters in this challenging times?
Yeah. Well, one is to thank you for your patience with us. I mean, most of us have never had the experience of growing up in a place where we weren't in the majority, most American Christians. And that, regardless of who you are, that creates a type of entitlement and a type of privilege that you just end up being blind to. And our gospel teaches us not to be like that, but it's just hard sometimes for us to see. And so if you are patient with us and you can forgive us and help us through conversations like Abdullah has had with me, where he's just able to, through the bonds of friendship, help me to, see things from his perspective and understand things. I mean, that's a great gift that you can give to us. I do, I don't represent anybody really but myself. But, I do, there's places where we haven't spoken up for you and haven't defended you. I do apologize for, and we want to be much better at that. I think that you play an important role especially in American society. And we're glad that you're here. And we realize that there are a lot of things that we will stand together on. There are some moral bedrock foundations, against secularism that we're going to have to stand together on increasingly in the future. I don't want to, and Abdullah, you would never want me to do this because you tell me this. I don't want to paper over some of the areas we disagree. I mean, some of those things are really crucial, and we believe eternity hinges on them. So I'm not trying to say, let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but I think that I can still, give my life, if that's what it takes, to defend your right to be here and to practice and believe what you believe. And I think we're going to make an important neighbor role here. I would hope that in places where you find yourselves more in power, so to speak, whether that's in a particular community in the United States, or whether that's in Pakistan or Indonesia or Sudan, or, somewhere, that you will also defend the rights of Christians there to be able to.
Or Egypt.
really practice, what they believe and live it out. Because I believe freedom, the only thing worse than freedom is a strong government where, a few people have absolute power. We want there to just be freedom where people can follow the conscience that they have. So I think there's a lot we can do together, and I'm gracious. By the way, let me say to everybody here, you couldn't have a better friend to a Christian than Abdullah. He has been for years just his humility. I'm not trying to just heap compliments on him, but when I tell other Muslims about what it looks like to have these kind of conversations, it's Abdullah's the guy that I use. And so the graciousness has just invited me in. It's been a big help to me.
Thank you so much. As they say, beauty is often in the eyes of the beholder, and absolutely that's the case here. But I will hold you up to that if there are Muslim concentration camps, I am packing and coming to your house.
You can. I got it right here.
As crowded and as congested as it is, I'm sure I can live in your basement.
You're always welcome.
I am eternally grateful, my friend. When these days are over, our next lunch or coffee is long overdue. On behalf of the entire Concordia community and the audience here, your Muslim brothers and sisters from both continents, thank you so very much. May God continue to bless you. May God continue to empower you to be the kind of leader that your community needs. And through you, may they find God Almighty. Thank you.
God bless you all as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mudassar.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Pastor. It was wonderful hearing you talk about all those wonderful things. And I really hope that we'll get to meet someday in the future and host you at a Concordia Forum event in the near future.
I hope so. The Lord willing. Inshallah, right?
Or you and I, Mudassar, will go to Southern Baptist Convention, which is, I hear, a lot of joy and one of the coolest parties you could ever attend.
I'd love to go check it out. That would be amazing.
Inshallah.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again, Abdullah, for hosting and pulling together this wonderful session.
Thank you very much.
For our next session, I'm going to first of all introduce our moderator. Fadime is a Concordia board member from Holland who's been involved with the Concordia Forum for almost, I think right from the beginning, right, Fadime? Maybe over 10 years. And we have two imams. We have Imam Omar Bajwa from Yale joining us and Imam Luqman from London joining us. So I'm going to hand over to Fadim, who can introduce them and continue with the rest of the session. Fadim.